Morning students, today we are going to introduce drama All My Sons, Act 1. This play was written by Arthur Miller. Today we are going to explain from page 3 to page 14. Before starting, we will introduce the characters of the play. We have the main character, Joe Keller. Joe Keller is the main character. He was accused of a crime, which was selling cracked cylinder heads to the army. As a result, 21 pilots were killed. Joe Keller was married to Kate, or mother, and they had two sons, Chris and Larry. Larry was reported missing 3 years ago, and he was in love with Anne. After being reported missing, Chris decided to marry Anne. Anne was the daughter of Steve Deaver, who was Mr. Keller's ex-partner. He worked for Joe Keller, and now he is in jail and pays for Keller's crime. Anne also had a brother. His name was called George. He is now a lawyer, and he wanted to open the old case again. We have the neighbors, Dr. Jam, who was an idealist doctor, and he was married to Sue, who was a materialist and jealous woman. We also have Frank, who works on Larry's horoscope, and he was married to Lydia, who was a friend of Anne. We have a young boy. He was called Bert. Bert was a young boy who played the game of the cop and thief with Joe Keller. Now we will introduce the summary of these pages. All My Sons takes place in a small American town in August, a couple of years after the Second World War. The events of the play occur on a single set, the backyard of the Keller home, where a tree has recently been blown down by a storm. The Kellers are a middle-class family. At curtain's rise, Joe Keller and Dr. Jim Payless are in the yard. Joe Keller is a businessman of about 60 years of age. He is middle-aged, a well-built man. He is a self-made man. When he speaks or reads, you get to feel that he is an uneducated man. Dr. Jam is a doctor who isn't very pleased with his job. He is an idealist who wants to do some medical research and discover something that helps and serves humanity. Jam, the local doctor, is making a small talk with his neighbor Joe. After some talk about the weather, Frank, who was another neighbor, enters. Frank is younger and superstitious. Keller is reading the want ads in the Sunday paper, and he is quietly impressed by all the different types of business there are nowadays. Frank notices the broken tree, and Keller replies sadly that it fell the previous night. His wife hasn't seen it. Franks refer indirectly to the fact that this tree was planted in memory of Keller's son Larry, who would have turned 27 this month. Frank knows Larry's birthday because he has been preparing a horoscope for Larry at the request of Keller's wife, Kate. She wishes to know if November 25th, the day on which Larry was reported missing in the war, was a favorable day for her son. According to this, it would have been fairly impossible for Larry to die on his favorable day. Keller mentions also that a girl named Anne is upstairs sleeping, and that the mention of her name makes Frank excited. Jim is new. He has never met Anne, and Frank is eager to see Anne, who has once lived with her parents in the house where Jim is living now. We have also Sue, who was Jim's wife. She came to tell him that a patient is on the phone. Jim says that the patient doesn't need his help and that he is over anxious about his health. And Sue suggests that he should be happy to take the fees, whether the patient is really sick or not. Sue mentions that Anne should stop by their house to see what they have done to the house she used to live in. We have also Lydia, who was Frank's wife. She enters to complain that the toaster is broken down again and she wanted Frank to mend it. And then Frank exists. Lydia, who was a friend of Anne, asks if Anne is still unmarried and whether she has overcome her sadness about Larry. Keller tells her that she isn't married yet. Lydia finds it hard to believe, and Keller replies that it's because of the war that Anne is single and that he has one son instead of two. Lydia exists and Chris Keller enters. Chris Keller is a young man of 32 who adores his father. They wonder what mother will say about the broken tree. A little boy named Bert runs in. He and Keller have a talk about the game in which Keller is the police inspector and Bert has been appointed to arrest other children in the town. After being told that there is a jail in the basement of the house, Bert leaves to continue his patrol. Chris and Keller resume conversation about the tree. Keller is worried about his wife's reaction when she sees Larry's blown down tree, but Chris told him that she had already seen it. Early that morning during the storm, Chris saw his mother standing beside the tree when it cracked. She was dreaming of her son. She woke up and was wandering around at night, like she used to do after Larry was reported missing. So she saw the tree crack and ran back to the kitchen and cried hard. Although Larry has been missing for several years, Mother still thinks that he is alive somewhere. Chris thinks it is dishonest that he and Keller allow her to hold on that dream while they themselves are rather certain that Larry is dead. Keller thinks it is impossible to convince Mother because they cannot prove that their son is dead, as long as there isn't a body or a grave. Another reason that strengthens Mother's belief that Larry is coming back is the newspapers. The newspapers always publish news about people who were missing but found after long periods. Chris sets his father down and says that he asked Anne to visit because he is going to propose to her. Keller is rather indifferent about the idea because Anne was Larry's girl. From Mother's point of view, Larry is not dead, so Anne is not available to Chris. But Chris insists that there is no other girl for him, even though they have not seen each other since the war. Now open your booklet, page 82. We have a summary of Act 1. The stage directions describe the Keller home as situated in an American suburb. It's roughly August 1947. The house is comfortable and well kept, as is the yard. Downstage left stands an apple tree stump. The trunk and the branches are toppled beside it. Joe Keller is in his yard reading the want ads. He is a self-made businessman of about 60. Dr. Jim Payless, his neighbor, is about 40. He is reading the paper too. Joe's neighbor on the other side, Frank, enters. He is 32. The neighbors chat about the weather and the want ads. Frank notices the felled tree. It was struck by lightning in the night. He observes how strange it is that the tree planted in memory of Larry was struck down in his birth month. Larry is Joe's son. He would have been 27 this August, which Frank remembers because he is working on Larry's horoscope. What Frank is trying to figure out at the request of Kate, Joe's wife, is whether the day on which Larry was reported missing was his favorable day, when, astrologically speaking, odds are he wouldn't die. The piques skeptical Jim's interest. He doesn't buy it. Talk turns to Anne, a young woman who used to live next door. She's visiting the Kellers and is upstairs asleep for now. Jem makes a quip about how the block could use a pretty face. Just then his fat wife enters, nagging him about a patient's phone call. Frank's wife Lydia comes in, also curious about Anne. Is she engaged? She was Larry's betrothed. Chris Keller enters. He is 32. He starts reading the book section. Joe and Chris start to talk about Larry's tree when 8-year-old neighbor Bert enters. He is Joe's deputy and tattles on some of the other kids on the street. He asks to see the jail Joe keeps in his basement, but Joe won't let him. Bert exists, turns back to the tree. Mom saw it last night, says Chris. She was outside when it broke. Then she came in and cried. Kit Keller still believes Larry is coming back, even though it's been 3 years. Chris thinks they should puncture the illusion. Joe wants to keep it intact. Chris sets his dad down. Listen up, Bob, he says. I'm going to propose to Anne. But Mom still thinks she is Larry's girl. Chris threatens to leave town and the family business if his father doesn't encourage his mother to support this marriage. Joe is shocked. Now these are the important questions with their model answers about these parts. The first question quotation. Larry was born in August. He had been 27 this month and his tree blows down. Frank, the killer's neighbor, he is working on Larry's horoscope, said this to Keller when he saw the blown down tree. He tries to show that the time of blowing down the tree means that Larry is still alive. What happens to your tree? This was said by Frank to Joe Keller when Frank noticed the blown down tree. The tree was planted in the remembrance of Larry, who has been reported missing in the war. What's a horoscope? A horoscope is the study of man's future and luck through the movements of stars and planets. What did Kate ask Frank to do? She asked him to make a horoscope to know if November 25th was a favorable day for Larry. Why did Chris invite Anne to his house? Chris invited Anne to his house to ask her to marry him. He knew that his mother was against that marriage, so he needed his father's help to convince his mother. Annie, I don't suppose she goes around dancing on her toes, but she seems to be over it. Keller said this sentence to Lydia when she asked him about Anne. Lydia wanted to know if Anne was still unhappy because of the old crime and what had happened. I know one thing, Dad. We have made a terrible mistake with Mother. This sentence was said by Chris to his father. He meant that they were dishonest with Kate because they let her believe that they were also waiting for Larry. Thank you for today. See you tomorrow, inshallah. Goodbye.